me what you see when you look at me. Do you see another brother lost in these streets looking for his soul?
Trying to find my soul.
Or do you see another brother searching for lost souls in these streets? A street soldier.
Street soldier.
Here to help you get that chip off your shoulder, warm your colder days and sober your drunken ways, and find a way to help you get over these hurdles placed in our path. And this is not meant to amuse you. This is for all those who have questions but are afraid to ask.
I won't be afraid. I won't be afraid. No. When times get hard, you lose your way. Open your mind and hear what I say.
This is a message for the hard and the soft. To those who tune in weekly and to those who keep an eye out for 8 p.m. on Sundays and turn their radios off. The truth hurts. The cloth has been pulled. We're walking around half dead. Use this show as your IV. Alive and free is a new movement. We've achieved self-destruction. A street soldier promotes self-improvement.
Streets couldn't be no colder, so I gotta be a soldier. It shouldn't be this hard for me. Even when it seems so hopeless, I gotta keep my focus. I'm glad to be alive and free, yeah. Streets couldn't be no colder, so I gotta be a soldier. It shouldn't be this hard for me. Even when it seems so hopeless, I gotta keep my focus. I'm glad to be alive and free, yeah.
Go. All right. I want to thank all of you for joining us. You know the topic. I got to explain how this came about. We're going to be tomorrow, the only, as far as I'm concerned, other than the war is obviously a huge story, but in America, to me, the biggest and really is these congressional hearings. It really came about, my thought about this came about last Monday as we celebrated Independence Day. And I'm thinking, Independence Day in the midst of these hearings, it was just crazy to me. Just like, wow. I mean, that's when I decided to do this show and get people's thoughts on the hearings, even though the hearings weren't over. You know, I just wanted to, we're halfway, maybe halfway, or I don't know how far we are through this. And then on Independence Day, we had a horrible shooting, which is like, I mean, the irony of ironies. On Independence Day, you have a shooting in Highland Park in Chicago. So, yeah, so I said, I got to talk to folks. And Dennis Siegler's on here. You know, I call and said, Dennis, I got to talk about this. We got to talk about this. And I said, well, let me, who can I put together to have this conversation? I said, well, why don't I bring back the cast from CAST? Oh, I didn't mean to say the two that actually fit. But the panel that we had last year from CAST, I thought would be great because that was a tough, some people would say, you know, a tough subject. The book itself, and but we had a wonderful discussion about the book, how people felt about it. And I said, this would be the natural group to just jump in because they're ready for tough subjects anyway. And they've all met each other and, you know, they pretty much, you know, they're their own little alive and free family on a Sunday night. So that's the group. I added a couple of other people. I added, isn't the Shire on? Oh my God. Where is she?
Okay, let me see. Here.
Okay. So I wanted to add a couple of youth voices because Nora, you and Thomas were the only young people. So I went out and found two of my Omegas and I get a message. One is sick and the other, just so you know, I'm not making this up. Dr. M, I'm really sorry. I don't think I'll be able to join tonight's show. As I was joining, something came up beyond my control. And whenever the kids do that, that just bothers the hell out of me. Now I'm trying to do the show, worried about something that came up with her. But you're gonna have to handle that herself. So Thomas and Nora, you will have to represent the young people again tonight. And Lady E, I tried to add a couple of, you know, obviously add a couple of women because it's a male-dominated panel. So you're gonna have to step in add to all the women, and because you're young at heart anyway, you can you can represent the young people too. So thank all of you for joining once again. And we got a lot to talk about. We're gonna move quickly. So here's how I want to do it. My first thought, and I told this to Dennis once, I'm gonna keep politics out of it. I said, but how am I gonna keep politics out of it? Well, okay, we're gonna try and keep politics. We're gonna just focus on what we're seeing in these hearings and our reaction to them and our thoughts about it. We're gonna open with this. We're gonna do like lawyers do, opening statements, right? Make an opening statement about your feelings about, and in your opening statement, you can say who you are, because see, if I went around and started your bios are like this long. So you just say, I'm so-and-so, and this is what I do. And these are my initial thoughts on these hearings, and then we'll come back and go more into depth. So who do I see first? I see Dennis. I get to do you first as I see you. Dennis Siegler, thank you for joining us once again. And just quick about you and your opening statement on these hearings.
Dr. Marshall, before we begin, I didn't hear you said you'd like to keep something out of it, but I didn't hear what that was.
I don't even know what I said. What I say?
You said that you want, well,
he said politics.
Politics.
He
Okay,
would
got
like
it.
to keep politics out,
Okay.
but then how can that possibly be
Okay,
done?
got it. Got it. Got it.
I'm gonna
Okay.
try. I'm gonna try. We're gonna try. Okay, thank you, sir. All right, Dennis.
Okay, first of all, thanks, Dr. Marshall, for having me do this again with you. I'm an OBGYN, work at Stanford and at Santa Clara County Hospital. And I know Joe for several years, but I've really become friends with him for the last several. My greatest claim to fame is I'm Nora's dad. And when you hear her, you'll understand. First of all, Malcolm stole my word when in your intro before we came on, when he said disgusting. Disgusting comes to mind. And I have, my intro is two things. Number one, what if this was Obama who had done this, as opposed to how it went down? What if that was Obama and his followers storming the Capitol? What if it was Obama who was committing the treason and sedition and trying to overturn everything that happened? And what was shocking to me is we all saw January 6th, and that was disgusting, troubling, and everything. What came out is how long the process was preparing ahead of time, how much time they went in to overturning the will of the people, to overturning everything. And January 6th was just like the tip of the iceberg of what happened. So that's my statement of how I view it.
That's a hell of an opening statement. Okay, all right, okay. My Will, good to see you. Will and I both play the piano, and we have been saying for years that we're going to get together and play, right, Will? We call each other Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock. It ain't happened yet, but we're going to do it, right, Will?
From your lips to God's ears, Dr. Joe. We still work at it though. We'll get it done one of these days soon, hopefully. So my name is Will Hobbs. I live in Oakland. I'm a native of Philadelphia. I've lived in California since 1979 and Oakland since 1999. And I work at a community development financial institution headquartered in Oakland, known as Community Bank of the Bay. We're the good bank. We try to find ways to get money to small businesses in traditionally underserved markets, as well as nonprofits and faith-based organizations. So that's how I make my living. And I've been in the financial services industry for most of my working life. So that's a bit about me. My reaction to the hearings is that I think that from the standpoint of presentation, that the committee has done an excellent job in putting this together and trying to make it digestible for people, particularly for people who pay close attention to politics or what's going on. I have to say that while the revelations have all been disturbing, including the pre-planning that Dennis just referred to, I am not surprised. I'm really not surprised by any of it, sadly. So that's my opening comment.
Thank you, Will. Lindbergh, and thank you for joining us because you are down in Mississippi. Where in Mississippi are you?
I am about half an hour, 45 minutes from where the chairperson of the committee that we're talking about grew up and served, Benny Thompson.
Benny Thompson, yeah.
Of the committee is from Mississippi, the Mississippi Delta, and I'm, as I said, I'm in Holmes County, which is 1.5 counties over from where he grew up and where he lives now.
Got to ask you on a personal level. My father's family is from Vicksburg. Where is Vicksburg compared to where you are?
A little bit southeast, about an hour and I don't know, 10 minutes or so. It's Vicksburg is a little bit farther south than where Chairman Thompson lives.
Okay, proceed, sir.
Happy to be here like others, and I am happy that the hearings are being televised as they are and that they are being run so well as people here in Mississippi are saying about the chairperson, with the dignity and sobriety that it takes to get the attention of the American people, and hope to hold that attention, because I think it's a serious challenge to our country, perhaps the most serious challenge I have seen in my now 70 plus years. And I watched the Watergate hearings involving Nixon and the Iran-Contra-Gate hearings involving Reagan, or the Reagan administration. And this is as troubling as either of those or both of them put together. So I think it's just very important that, one, we're having this panel, too, that we are paying attention to what is going on, and that the committee has put the work and time in it, and the seriousness of purpose that is required to hope to save our democracy.
Thank you, Lindbergh. Tim Kochis, I don't know if you're here in Chicago, I don't know where you are, but thank you for being here once again. By the way, I have a distinct USF flavor on this call. I have Jonathan Greenberg and Tim and Lindbergh, both former trustees at USF, as with me. So, I got to lean on my alma mater. So Tim, go right ahead.
Lindbergh is still a trustee. I'm a trustee emeritus at this point. And I'm participating from my apartment in San Francisco. I'd say two things as opening remarks. One is an echo of things we've heard from others, that the facts here are, the facts of January 6th are not in dispute. We all saw them over and over and over again. But what was a revelation was the extent of the advanced planning by Trump and others for months before that. But none of that was really surprising, because it was all foreshadowed. Trump, being the narcissist and self-interested person he is, let us all know that this was how he was going to respond to an election that did not go his way. So that's my first opening comment. My second opening comment is that this is appropriately a trial in the court of public opinion. The proceedings have been criticized for not observing all of the niceties of a criminal proceeding, and they don't need to. At some point, I hope there will be criminal proceedings, and all of the niceties will be observed, but that's not what this is about. This is about trying to convince those, unfortunately, still many people who don't want to believe that Trump was capable of doing what, in fact, he did. So that's what this whole proceeding is about, is trying him in the court of public opinion. And I think he will be convicted in that court in a traditional, if you will, criminal proceeding. He will not be stupid enough not to insist on a jury trial. And I really think it will be difficult given how many people are still seduced by him, I think it will be very difficult to get a jury of 12 people to convict him. All it takes is one holdout, and I'm sure that as hard as the prosecution will try to field a jury that is unbiased, they won't be able to keep out a few diehard Trumpists. So I don't think he will be convicted in a traditional criminal proceeding, but I think he will be convicted in this court.
All right, that's a powerful opening statement, sir. Thank you so far. Louis Grice, how are you once again? By the way, your wife decided to let you represent the family this time. I tried. Sadie was like, nah, you can do it. So thank you for coming on again, brother.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I couldn't pass it up, to tell you the truth. And I'm Louis Grice. I live in San Francisco. I teach mathematics at Lowell High School. And my opening statement has to do with the fact that in reactions is that, simply put, being a political science major, I've been fascinated to see the legislative process at work in this capacity. I think the committee members are doing a great job. They are, vested in this process, and hats off to everybody who has come forward and demonstrated the kind of courage we need to see in this country. And this is a moment in this country where we have to really be finders of facts, and hanging our hats on facts. And so it is my hope that we get not just a lot of verbiage, but an outcome at the end of these hearings. And I hope that we can redirect the focus of America away from conspiracy theories and all these other odd notions, and just really get back to the groundation and foundation that made us who we are as a country. And that's where I want to leave it.
Thank you. Okay, Jonathan, I'm gonna come to you last. Let me get my young people in here. Just because I'm tired of talking to old folks. So, Nora, let me thank you. Nora, you are in Miami. And if I am incorrect in saying this, thank you for joining us. It's like you're 3 hours ahead. And your dad let the cat out of the bag to everybody in the world. You're in medical school, right? This is your first year in medical school. That's good. All right. Dad, you should be clapping. Okay, thank you. I know. Maybe it's because you got to pay for it. Maybe that's why you ain't clapping, but I understand. I know. So Nora, thank you once again. You are always a delight to have on the show. The floor is yours.
Hi, Dr. Marshall. Yes, thank you for inviting me on again. It's always a pleasure to learn from you and all of the other wonderful guests you bring on. And I did start medical school this week and I got sick. I hope that's not a predictor of how the rest of the next 4 years are going to go. Yeah, so I have been squeezing in some of the January 6th hearings as I've been able. And I would like to echo what Will and Tim have said about the unsurprising nature of this story. We have seen it coming, and I think I speak for a lot of young people when I say that it's unsurprising that the amount of corruption and influence that money and white skin can buy you in this country. I think the structure that has permitted this whole thing to unfold and continues to uphold Trump as someone who is still very much influencing large numbers of people, that existing structure is wrought with issues that make this unsurprising. But what I will say is what has been a little more surprising is how many people have come forward who were previously complicit in his movement and how many people have come forward and turned on him as loyal supporters to speak the truth. I think that is this is becoming an important turning point, or could become an important turning point. So I will say, and I'm sure we'll get into the details a little bit more about what's to come from these hearings, but I have been surprised by the cracks that it's showing in this power structure, and it will be interesting to see what happens.
Thank you, Nora. Thomas, good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Excited to be here. Echoing Nora, I'm just excited to listen and learn from everyone else on the panel. I'm a master's student studying environmental science at UC Santa Barbara right now, and yeah, I had my finals 3 weeks ago, so I've been trying to catch up on the January 6th hearings. I think, yeah, I want to echo what a lot of people have said, that I was not surprised by anything that was unearthed or presented, but I just have been fighting like this profound sense of bewilderment about the whole thing. I mean, it's structured like a courtroom drama, right? But the universe it's like describing feels kind of disconnected from what I would like to think our institutions and America represent. And there's just a lot of like discord, like deep disenchantment being unearthed by everyone here who's presenting in the hearings. And I like to think myself as politically conscious and politically active, but I think me and a lot of young people feel pretty disconnected from what's happening. And I would like to change that. I hope it does shift. Maybe when the hearings conclude and there's some actual like teeth to them, if the judiciary decides to actually go after Trump or some of his top allies, that might change things. But right now, I know we're not talking about politics, but it does sort of feel like theater to me, to a large degree.
To your point, both Nora and Thomas, I had the last training we did was primarily a group of young people that work with young people. And I asked them, this maybe 3 weeks ago, and we did this training when the hearings were going, and I asked, are any of you watching the hearings? And hardly any of them, none of them have been watching the hearings. And I asked why. They just looked at me with a blank stare, and somebody said, well, because they ain't gonna do nothing about him anyway. Basically, they said they ain't gonna do nothing about him anyway. So, why are we watching? And when I looked at the demographic that has been watching, it is heavily skewed to older Americans. And the group that has been watching them least have been, young Americans. So your remarks just spoke to what I have heard and what I saw from those young people. And I said, well, no, y'all really need to be watching this. This is at least pay attention to it. But they pretty much said what you said. Jonathan, bring us up. Go right ahead. Your thoughts, your feelings. Good to see you, my brother.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marshall. Is Malcolm going to speak, or is after me? No?
Malcolm, Malcolm, don't worry about Malcolm.
Okay, well, I'll jump in. I'm Jonathan Greenberg. I'm the director of the USF Institute for Nonviolence and Social Justice. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm proud to be part of the Alive and Free family. It means a lot to me. I'm honored that Dr. Marshall and Lindbergh Porter are on our leadership council for our institute, and I'm just happy to be here with all of you. And greetings to Lady Estelle as well. Anyway, I want to jump in. I have a couple things to say. First of all, like Lindbergh said, I am old enough to remember when I was a senior in high school, they actually had the TV on in the high school during the Watergate hearings. I remember sitting there riveted and watching at the exposure of corruption in this country. But as Nora said, this corruption is so deep, and the corruption that's being exposed now is just profoundly more severe than the one that was being exposed then. So I agree with Lindbergh and others that this issue is the most serious challenge that in my lifetime I've seen to this country's democracy. I believe that democracy began in the United States in 1965, because it wasn't until 1965 that voting rights were secure for Black Americans and then, you know, we had 1964, we had civil rights secured for all Americans for the first time. It took the Civil War and then 100 years afterwards to secure those rights. But Dr. King wrote a book. His last book in 1967 was called Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? And there's a chapter in that book I encourage everyone to look at. It's called The White Backlash. And he said, be careful, because every major achievement that we make will be met with backlash from white supremacy. It always has been, and it will again. And I think that what we're witnessing now what happened in January 10th, but also in so many 6th, January 6th, and so many other areas is a severe experience of white backlash. It was an attempt to overthrow the government and overthrow and disenfranchise Americans. And I just want to make two last points. One, it was almost successful. The reason it was not successful is only a handful of states' attorneys general who had the integrity to not be corrupted by the efforts to manufacture votes. But those people are being replaced all over this country at this time. There were 139 members of Congress and 8 senators, 147 Republicans voted against certifying the vote even after the violence. And the violence is the right word. Trump, you know, I was riveted by this testimony by Cassidy, I can't remember her last name, but she talked about how Trump knew these people had AR-15s and all, and she said, bring them in. They're not going to shoot at me.
Jonathan, I want you an opening statement, not a middle
I'm
and
done.
a closing statement.
I'm done. So,
I know you.
So I'm done. So
because we're going to get to all of this.
It almost succeeded, and it was an attempt to harness exactly the kind of violence you talk about every day, the disease of violence. Yeah. And so we have to fight it through nonviolence. Thank you. Sorry for such a long opening.
No. I mean, it is something. Look, I got 10 Americans on here, right? And we're all invested in. We're all in this together. Like, much as I want to go to Wakanda, I can't. I'm in this with everybody else. Wakanda, unfortunately, was a movie. Lady E, you want to give your opening thoughts?
I will. I know that Will had his hand up a moment ago. Will, did you have anything you want to say before I? Because I know you had your hand up.
I had a question for Thomas in particular. And the question was, what is the consequence of disconnectedness in your generational group?
It's a good question. It's not great. I think, yeah, we're constantly being told conflicting messages in that, like, we're the future, you know, we need to be engaged because we're going to inherit these institutions eventually and have to run them and keep our democracy going, hopefully. But then we're also being shown that our political voice doesn't really matter a lot of the time, or at least it feels that way to a lot of people, which I think is really dangerous because, you know, the more disconnectedness there is, the more inaction, the more fragile everything becomes. I wish I had an answer on how to combat that, but if I did, I'd probably be running for office somewhere. I think the key is I think the commission actually is a great idea. I just think that it's a form of media that's directed towards an older generation. There are probably other ways of getting younger folks involved. I think they're more decentralized, like via social media on campuses in discrete locations. more grassroots. But yeah, this I mean, I was, before going on the show, Nora and I were, talking about this, and I was asking some other friends my age, hey, I don't know much about the January 6th commissions. Can you like fill me in? What do you know? And they were all like, oh, I haven't been watching them. I don't know. I know less than you. So I think, yeah, it is pretty widespread. And there are other ways to get around it, but it's not going to be with this commission, I would say.
Thank you, Tom.
To echo, I did ask our kids at Alive and Free, and they hadn't been watching either. So this is our Leadership Academy. I would say it's been 16 and 21, and they were like, they heard about it, but they hadn't been watching. So yeah, go ahead, lady.
Okay, I have to agree with so much that's already been said. The committee has and is doing an exceptional job, courageous and clear. The information that's come out is unbelievable, yet very believable because of who he is and how I say Trump. Okay, I saw Dennis's question, like, who is the he? Okay, when he said I could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue, it's like, okay, that was before he was elected. So, and then, as Johnson said, profoundly more severe. What's happening today is definitely profoundly more severe than what happened during Watergate. And that was just astounding, unbelievable. But we have come from a time, if I could just say, where TV commercials, they didn't used to attack each other, but now they do. So there is a level of honor that's been lost over the years. But today, what we're seeing is not only severe, it's supported. It's happening out loud and in public. When you do dirt, you don't want people to know, you try to keep some dirt hidden. But this kind of thing is just out loud in your face in public. And it's just, it's just amazing to me. For the young people, when you say that in the future, the youth today will be running these institutions, and our young people really don't know how they're running because they're not watching it. The question for me is, how did this happen? You think that after years of where is the integrity? Years of, I'm gonna hurry up, and so I'm gonna use my shorthand speak, lying and cheating and just doing underhanded stuff. Somebody's got the courage to stand up and say enough. But instead, today, that's not what we're seeing until, oh my goodness, hands up for Liz Cheney. Hands up, hands down, oh my goodness. And it's a woman who said enough. Somebody's got to have something.
I know what you're getting ready to say.
I know.
That begins
And
with
she's got them.
Listen.
If anybody knows me, knows the word. So yeah, that's my opening statement. This has been beyond unbelievable, because even Barry Goldwater, and I remember watching him and I thought, oh my goodness, yeah. He had the courage to tell Nixon, man, I can't ride with you on this one. Oh my goodness.
I'm gonna have to do what I did to Jonathan.
No, I'm not, I can't go yet. Okay. All right.
So we will get to all of this. We will get to all
and there's a hand. Lindbergh's
we'll
hand.
Get to all of this. Well, let me do this, because I'm trying to, it's gonna a lot to cover here. And it seems like pretty much we're all on the, we're all on the same page here. We're all appalled by this. What has been the most, just focusing on the hearing so far, and we may have to do this again because there's the president's lawyer is going to, Trump's lawyer is going to testify on Tuesday, and that's going to be another. What has been the most surprising thing to you so far? The most surprising thing, and I think, Nora, you may have said this already, but I'd like to hear from each of you, what has been the most surprising thing that you've seen so far? Jonathan?
Just briefly, what I said was that Trump said he was upset because there were his members of the mob surrounding. They didn't let into the place where he was speaking. He wanted to fill it up for the TV, and he said, "Take down the weapons checks." Okay. I don't care if they have AR-14s. They're not going to point it at me. He knew how violent it was.
Okay, thank you. Tim, you're most surprising.
My answer is simple, one word: nothing surprises me about this. During COVID, I read 11 books about Trump to see if there was some shred of decency about this person. And uniformly, he is an indecent person. He's mentally ill. He has a serious mental problem, narcissism in the extreme, and he is a real danger, has always been a danger to this country. So nothing about this surprises me.
Okay. Dennis, what has surprised you?
Well, first, nothing surprises me in the hearing, but this goes to what Tim said, that this is really a case of trial in the public about winning public opinion. What surprises me is that with all the video evidence, recorded evidence, absolutely knowledge-based testimony, the pretzels that his elected supporters, senators, congressmen, will go out of their way and somehow justify what was done. Pretend it didn't happen, pretend it doesn't matter, pretend it isn't important, because they all want to keep power. They all want to keep Voldemort, or since we can't use his name, behind them. So he'll support them so they don't have to get primaried out, so they don't have to run against the venom of the backlash of his supporters. I'm surprised that Cheney is one of the few people, and Kinzinger, by the way, both of them may lose right now. Everybody else is so afraid of the backlash that they defend what happened. That to me is surprising. I'm surprised that senators don't have more, that senators don't have the urge to do the right thing.
Thank you.
That surprises me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dennis. That's my word. I decided not to say it. It's like,
I actually thought you was gonna say another word.
I was like, where are they at?
The only one that was this Cheney.
Lewis, what has surprised you?
Well, for lack of a better word, absolutely nothing. But crushed truth will rise. And I think a lot of truth has been crushed. And it's my faith in the process that is still at play. But if I had to pinpoint one incident that came out of the hearing that really struck me, was Mark Meadows' inability to comport himself at that moment when Hutchinson was there, making him aware of what was going on.
Right.
I'm not giving him no excuse, but whatever had him trapped on that sofa, that really was alarming to me. I would like to see where this guy is when he ever shows up, you know. But yeah, Mark Meadows, the chief of staff.
Thank you. Will?
There are no profiles encouraged in any of this crew. So I think it's a false expectation to think that such will occur. Cassidy Hutchinson, of course, has turned out to be a wonderful person to come to the table and tell the truth. And it's my hope that Pat Cipollone will do something similar, that he will be the John Dean for this set of hearings. But nothing surprised me, as I said earlier. I have a perspective that is informed by the early portion of my banking career when I worked in the real estate construction industries department at Citibank in New York, in Manhattan. And the Trump organization was one of our clients. So I've had an early look at Donald Trump going back to the 1970s. So nothing that he does surprises me, particularly if it is demonstrating a lack of ethics, a lack of integrity, a lack of truth telling. The man's been a liar and a cheat and a sleaze for his entire life.
Thank you, sir.
And Lindbergh's hand was up a while back.
I'm coming to him. Lindbergh, you're next.
I wanted to make a different point when I raised my hand, but I don't know that I'm surprised by any one thing. I am surprised by how alarmingly close we came to having this government subverted. And God knows what kind of government we would have now if one more person, perhaps one more person had not acted, or one more person had acted. We are not quite certain which of those, or perhaps both, would have been required, but we were so very close, and we haven't removed ourselves from that yet. So that really is a sobering surprise for me.
Okay, hang on to your question. We'll get back to that. Let me get through everybody. Thomas?
Yeah, I was most surprised, as Lady Estelle and Dennis had pointed out, by the inclusion of Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney on the panel. Pleasantly surprised, but also, Liz Cheney, impressive. I don't agree with her politics. Adam Kinzinger, same thing. I don't think Kinzinger's running for re-election, actually. He's kind of like falling on his sword for this one. And I think I was also simultaneously surprised by like the lack of sort of mass action on both sides of the aisle. If we really believe that this is like the greatest threat to our democracy that we faced in our lifetime, certainly, why is there not more of that sort of like, self-destructing your political career for the greater good of the republic or whatever? But maybe that's quixotic. I don't know.
I'm making a note of that because I will have something about that later. And Nora, I think you may have said it before, but I'm gonna give you what has surprised you, a surprising moment or surprise about this hearing.
Right. Well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the most surprising thing to me was the few people that came forward to speak the truth. I think it highlights a real distinction between my generation and my dad's, because the thing that he found surprising was how few senators and people that were loyally following this dangerous insurrection, how few of them decided to come forward and speak the truth and are continuing to cover up this threat to democracy. But to me, and I think, again, a lot of young people my generation, that's not surprising. I think that there's a feeling of helplessness that Thomas described in the way we interact with politics and our democracy. And so many young people feel scared and frustrated by this, yet feel helpless to do anything. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people just shut it out. We're kind of desensitized. And so in my mind, I was surprised to see that, maybe there is a turn happening where some people are actually coming to step forward and speak the truth. Who knows what will lead, but that was kind of an interesting distinction.
I will say this for me, and that was my first input in the most surprising and craziest thing I heard was Trump's behavior in the limousine. I mean, I knew this guy was nuts. I know he's nuts, right? But him screaming at the Secret Service. So there's two things here. The Secret Service, take me to the Capitol, grabbing the wheel. Now, wait a minute, have you ever tried to grab? You see movies like this, right? We see movies of people grabbing the wheel. This is the presidential limousine, and he goes to grab the wheel, and he's cussing, I'm the effing president, and then he goes after the guy's throat. Let me tell you, you couldn't make a movie, a Hollywood movie out of this. And people are like, man, that's a hell of a story. And the fact, I mean, I was like, oh, this dude is, how do we say it without young? He's on one. I mean, he's really on one. The flip side of that is, and you said this before, the people that stood in the breach, those Secret Service said, I don't care if you are the president. I'm just thinking about that. Now, you ain't going. That to me, again, I'm thinking all these movies I've seen, you know, Air Force One, all the presidents, right? And they're like, no, you're not going. I don't care if you are. Because, I mean, this is the guy's used to getting his way with anything, because, they're men. But those two things right there was just, those two moments for me were like, man, this guy is like incredible. So those are the two, and then Hutchinson testimony, all that, just wow, mind blowing. Lady E, a moment for you.
Oh, well, let's see. There's a hand.
Well, I'll get to I want to get everybody's.
You're gonna get to the hand. Okay. Okay. I'm just trying to be. All right. Well, I want to be surprised. But I'm not, because I think I've just been around long enough to see some of the most reprehensible, atrocious behavior through my lifetime, and how that behavior continues to be supported. The lack of integrity, and I'm just not surprised. I'm just disgusted. I'm just disgusted. I was raised in a way where, if you make sure what you say and what you do represents yourself, your family, your people. Don't open your mouth and say something, you end up looking like a fool. But we put one in power. We put one in power, and then we want to be surprised about what happens, instead of diligent about maintaining those things that we believe in and hope for. No, there's the assumption that it's not going to touch me. I'm going to be all right despite whatever happens, or whatever it is. I'm just disgusted by it. But I am hopeful that, despite the politics, that right and truth will win somehow. That's just, so I'm not.
Okay, a couple of questions. Yes. Tim, you've got one, and there was a question earlier that somebody, I don't know who, maybe Lindbergh, you wanted to ask. Why don't you do that right now? Because then now I want to move into another question. So Tim, you got something you want to throw out?
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Mine was not actually a question, but it was a response to the sense of despair that I'm hearing from a number of people about this is terrible, and we somehow can't fix it. We can fix it, but it's going to take a long time, and it's going to take determination for young people, the Noras and the Toms of the world, and lots of Black and brown people electing different kinds of people to represent us in Congress. And once they're there, then to affect structural change, like non-repeatable terms, term limits, changing the House of Representatives terms from 2 years to 4, with half the House being reelected every 2 years, as opposed to the entire House. And then term limits on House terms and Senate terms, so that people are not only focused on being reelected, that so we get people who are brought into politics to serve as genuine civil servants, because they know they can't be there forever. They can be there for 1 or 2 terms, and that's it. And that is going to take a long time to make that happen. But if we give up on it, it will never happen. We have to be determined that that's the result we want. And we've got to get a lot of people out to vote to elect people to Congress who will do that.
And while we're getting all those people out to vote, we also need to be getting it so that people's votes are honored and counted and recognized. And we are not still fighting you know, those brown people and Black people and all those other people who want to vote, who stand in line and can't drink water, that we can do that. See, that's another issue.
Yeah, that's all in the pot here. That's all in the pot here. So Nora and Thomas, we're gonna take you on a history lesson, okay? And this is important because, you know, I look, my favorite line with young people is, I don't believe in generation gap. I believe in the truth gap. I really do. I believe truth is truth. I don't care if 2 + 2 is 4, whether you're 10 or whether you're 100, right? So I always try whatever to try and get the truth. I want to add, but in this history lesson, I want to ask, because everybody else on this understand, Watergate was treated completely different by members of Congress, senators, and representatives. And Jonathan, you alluded to that, you know, you watched it, right? What happened? What do you think has happened when they universally stood up to Richard Nixon and said, hey, you can't break in and do this, you can't do that. Man, that goes against all the constitutional and democratic norms this country stands for. That was 50 years ago, right? About 50 years ago. What do you think has happened in that? And I think all of us would agree that the Nixon thing was bad. But this thing is something, I'm telling you, if you had wrote an Olympus, a movie about the overthrow of the government, some people are like, come on, that's not gonna happen here. No way. What do you think has happened in the intervening 50 years that has allowed elected officials, I mean, to not have that same degree of integrity? What do you, that's your thoughts on that, anybody?
Dr. Marshall, before we jump in, I wanted to go back to see if Lindbergh Porter, he had a question before or a thought. I don't know if you wanted to raise it or to wait, Lindbergh.
You can do both. I'll do both. I just wanted to point out, particularly to the young folk, that this is not a criminal trial. The organizing resolution for this committee, and I'm quoting here, to investigate the facts, circumstances, and causes relating to the January 6, 2021 domestic terrorist attack, and to propose recommendations to make sure that the events are not repeated. There's a separate Justice Department investigation, the United States Justice Department. There are at least two other investigations that have direct bearing, one very directly in Georgia, where subpoenas have been issued and investigations are ongoing, and the other is in New York and other states as well. So this is not a one-time only event to make a determination regarding this, but the Congress of the United States has the authority and the power to do what it's doing, and it's necessary to do so. And its objective is different from a criminal investigation, from that of the Justice Department or from the state attorneys generals that are investigating. And on this question that you just asked, what is different? The Watergate investigation in 1973, Nixon's second term in office, they had just been reelected to a second term. Everybody, or many people, both Democrats and Republicans, could be on board for that, because it was not about a change in who runs this country, about the power in this country. Mm-hmm. That regarded who would potentially be president of the country, and a president doing wrong. But Nixon leaving office or not staying in office was not directed at and was not going to change the power structure in this country. Mm. Here, Trump remaining in office was a move toward and virtually certain to change the power structure in this country. And his removal from that goes to changes in the power structure of this country. And that's the great fear in my mind. And it's men who are to blame. And it is those who have been in power and afraid of losing power that is at risk now. And that's why you don't have what we had in 1973.
Okay.
Because we could change the president, but we were not going to change the power. This change the president, we change the power, or perhaps not change the power, but certainly expose or present the possibility for the change in power.
Okay, thank you. Will, then I come to you, Dennis. Your thoughts on what's different?
I just wanted to amplify the point that Lindbergh just made. I think that there is an intersectionality between racism and authoritarianism here. And I think it also reflects a backlash against the fact that we had the first and only Black president of the United States, and that people within the power structure that Lindbergh referred to are very, very much frightened and afraid of the possibility that people who don't look like them will rise to power and set the direction for this country. And I think that's an underlying theme that runs through all of this, and also perhaps explains why we don't see any evidence of profiles in courage.
It's not only an underlying theme, it's a movement.
Dennis, what do you think is different?
Yeah, first of all, I think that the Obama election was an accelerant. I think this was going to happen anyway, but this backlash happened right now specifically because of that racial event. But I think the big difference is social media, because in Watergate, everybody saw it on 3 channels. It was ABC, NBC, CBS, and everybody saw the same thing. Right now, you have a minority rule taking place. You know, they gerrymandered the districts and they're getting themselves reelected, and they make it so that they control the different houses of government of each state and the attorneys general. But more so, it's an echo chamber. These hearings, and I was really surprised when Nora and Thomas said that young people universally aren't listening to it, because I didn't know that. But I did know that the Fox watchers, the OAN network, the Newsmaxes of the world, the Steve Bannons, none of them are covering these hearings. And all of them are covering them in such a fashion that it's not even, we're called Democrats, we're called the evil, we're called the problem, as opposed to we're all Americans. And they're just echoing amongst themselves. So even though it's a question of winning in the public face of how everything happens, if those people are not seeing it, are not recognizing it, not acknowledging it, we're spinning our wheels. And I don't know how to do that. And social media allows these people to do their conspiracy theories and just echo it to themselves. It allows them to sit amongst themselves, because there is no universal broadcast. There's no universal NPR that everybody sees, or the AP that everybody reads, or the New York Times that everybody reads. The New York Times has been sliced off, and that part of the government of those people doesn't even look at it. They've ignored it. The same way we don't see what Fox and OAN are spreading to those people. It's very, very difficult. It's complicated, and I don't have a quick and easy answer. But I think the young people are the ones who are going to have to bridge that social that social separation. Anyway, that's my thought.
I'm going to come to you. Let me just I guess the public is one thing, but I guess I'm looking at the elected officials. And, so I just want to keep that in mind, because, and I got Thomas and I got Tim. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to pose a question to you, Dr. Marshall and Dennis. Earlier, you said something about truth being truth, and that's something you believe, and that's something I would like to believe too. And it kind of like reminded me of something I heard on this like podcast about the Supreme Court recently, about Anthony Kennedy and his obsession with the book 1984. And over he comes back to this one scene where the protagonist is being tortured by like the government until they say 2 + 2 = 5. And finally they do it, and then the torture continues, and they ask why. And the torturer says, well, you have to say it till you believe it. But he used this logic in his swing vote in the Citizens United case, to like allow corporations to have political speech, to be people to spend money as people would in political campaigns. And arguably, like, that disastrous decision did more than anything to kind of destroy the whole truth forward political process, I would argue. So I'm kind of just wondering, Dennis, you're also talking about these media silos, people not having the same diet of like the information that they're getting. And over time, you can see that like the conspiracy theorists diverge from the rest of us. Do you think that we can still at least act politically as if truth is truth, or do we have to concede that there are different realities for people?
You're asking me?
Both of you, whoever wants to answer.
Right, no, I would say that until people have the courage to say the truth, they're going to respond to what they hear. They're just trying to get reelected in their own district, in their own area, and they keep hearing over and over and over again the same thing. It's what Putin's doing in Russia. It's this, the people in Russia don't hear what the Ukrainians think. They don't hear what the people opposed to the military action are doing. They're all hearing that this is a glorious Russian action. Well, the same thing happens if all you hear is a replay. It's the politicians too. I mean, the politicians know better because they do get to listen to the other side when they meet in Congress, but they're really not listening. They're talking and speaking, but they're not listening. And that's the sad truth of where we are currently. Did that answer that question? I mean,
well he threw my name in there too, and then Tim, I'm going to come to you. Now, Tom, here's the really difficult thing, and I think Dennis alluded to it. If any of you have watched the Social Dilemma, right, the documentary about social media, it's all about disinformation and truth. There is no, in fact, the whole thing is there is no truth, right? So, of course, and the ironic thing about this whole thing, it is based on, when we talk about the disease of violence and that we work with our young people around, we talk about the germs of bad information, bad advice, bad example, bad instruction. In fact, this whole thing is based on incorrect information. The whole thing is based on the election was rigged and he didn't lose, but he did. So what gets me about this whole thing is based solely on something that wasn't true. And the fact that this democracy could go under on something that isn't even fact is incredible to me. So yes, all of that's in the pot here, because Trump's whole game is, if I say it enough, you'll believe. He's always been that way. If I say it enough, it didn't happen. That's all he does. And he will deny until he's gone. Trump will be gone in grave 50 years now. He'll be saying, I won the election, right? Okay. That's his game, right? So what's astounding to me is this wonderful democratic experiment could all go under based on something that isn't even true. And America was was supposed to be able to, the leveling principle was the Constitution and the democratic experiment. That was supposed to be the thing that was supposed to hold us all together. That's sorely being tested here by something that isn't even true. And it's fascinating to me. I mean, and I'm going on too long. You remember you in junior high and middle school and people spread a rumor, like, everybody started to believe the rumor, right? But this is as juvenile as anything you'll ever see. I mean, this is third grade, second grade, fourth grade stuff, because it isn't even true. So you're right. The truth here is, you made a very good point, sir. And social media has a lot to do. And the tools that have been used to spread non-truth are social media tools. I'm sorry, Tim, I went on. You go ahead and then I'll get Lewis.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to the question about what's changed.
Yeah.
50 years since Watergate. And Dennis made one really important point, is that at that time we had three networks and only three networks, and they were all trusted, and none of them had any overt political agenda. They set themselves up as truth tellers, and people trusted them, and people read and trusted the daily newspapers. That was the common and respected source of information. That is a huge change from what is the case today. But the other change, and here I'm going to go to my favorite theme of structure. One of the structural problems that we have today are the primaries. The primaries, for those of you who don't remember, were an invention of the early 70s. The idea was to take the selection of nominees out of the smoke-filled rooms and put it in the hands of the people by having primaries. Guess what? Who shows up to primaries? Only the true believers. And consequently, you get people at both extremes of the political spectrum who are elected to office. The center has been completely hollowed out. So, and I'm not the only person to say this. Adam Kinzinger, whose name came up just a while ago, has said the very same thing. We need to do away with primaries so that the center can once again be represented.
Lewis and then Nora.
Okay. I just want to get in on, I think Dr. King said this, the arc of justice bends toward truth. And I think we have to stay committed to that premise. It takes a long time, and it has been a long time, but truth is still coming out. But what I want to say structurally, back to the last guest's point, this whole thing has caused us to focus on the three branches of government again: the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the legislative branch. And these are the branches that hold this democracy together. And for whatever reason they decide or they falter, it puts us all at peril. And that's what we just witnessed. You mentioned the politicians, Dr. Marshall, and you're right. They sit there and they go through this routine of debate and filibustering and whatnot, and we get little done. So I really do believe this is a good example and a good way for us to look at how social studies need to be readdressed and the political process need to be readdressed. Because if we don't, it could easily fall apart, and we just saw that. And it's a structural thing, structural violence. That's what we saw January the 6th as a result of these three branches not holding each other accountable. And so I hope that we can bring young people, like I say, in every political system, there's always apathy. And that's what we're going to see, what we see in our system. But I do believe that this whole process has given us a chance to re-identify with the three branches of government in the right way. And yeah, so I won't be too much longer than that.
Nora.
Yeah, so I wanted to make a comment on information dissemination and also what's changed in the last 50 years. I think that it's easy to idealize or romanticize how information was shared 50 years ago or 30 years ago, or idealize how broadcasting or media was shared 30 years ago. But I think something that's worth noting is with modern forms of communication through social media or just the internet more broadly, we are able to share the narratives of people and communities who were previously silenced. So 30 years ago, 50 years ago, there might have been 3 broadcasting networks. You learn what you learn in school, and maybe then learn what is shared with you on these broadcasting networks. But it might be worth considering who was controlling those broadcasting networks, who was controlling the information that was shared to you in school, and whose narratives were being left out. Because currently we are bombarded with information, largely a lot of misinformation, and it's so hard to sift through what's true when you're getting so much. But at the same time, we're also, if you can decipher what is misinformation, what is truth, you can actually start to parse out some narratives and some perspectives from people and communities who were previously silenced. So I think it's just worth considering that with social media and the rise of modern communication, although there are all of these issues that are posed with information dissemination, there's also an opportunity to give voice to people who didn't previously have the opportunity to provide their side.
Good point. Good point. What's the thing? I would say because it has such great, and I will use the word power, the integrity of the user is even more important now than it was before. And I think that probably all of us just looking at what's going on with our elected officials, I'm sticking with them because they're the ones who are looking at this thing. The lack of integrity is just, for me, just astounding. I mean, completely. It's you know, and Dennis has heard me talk about this. I don't like politicians, okay? I like public servants. And it seems to me that a lot of these folks, they're in it for the power. And the disease of violence, and Lady Sell knows we talk about it all the time, is about power, domination, and control. And this was a power grab. It was purely a power grab. There's so much that had happened on January 6th and continues to happen that I don't even now have to talk about what's going on in the hood. I just use what's going on in the government and talk about, you know, peer pressure and fearship and all the things that we do and power dying. And it's right on display. It's incredible because for years they were pointing it over there. But here it is right on display in front of the world. It's incredible to me that's in front of the world. So to me, and I think this is why Liz Cheney gets a lot of credit from, whether you like her politics or not, this woman has integrity. This woman has integrity. I mean, that's all you can ask for anybody. And you know, Nora and Tom, what's so hard for us? This is what we teach our kids. I'm spending my life teaching young people to have integrity. You know, your word is bond, and you know, and then you get, I don't even call them leaders, you get elected officials. I don't use the word leaders anymore. They're just elected officials who apparently so many have no integrity. None. I mean, if you are people privately say, yeah, well, I know it's not true, but I'm not gonna say anything. And these are people running things. It's incredible to me. I mean, did anybody even foresee this possibly coming? And this is the great democratic experiment. I mean, and that's in the end, I'm going to wrap this up. How you think this thing is going to play out? To me, there's never, other than the Civil War, right? When it was, you know, one says that slavery is a state, and the other says slavery is and we go to war. There's never been a time like this. In fact, I don't think it's ever been a time that so-called patriots walked onto the Capitol building, tried to hang the vice president. I mean, do people get this? I mean, just to you, as you talk to people, do they really get this? I'm not sure I get it, but in your conversations with people, do people get what really happened there?
At the instruction of the so-called president, who said, let's go down there.
I mean, no president's ever done that. Do people get this? Go ahead, Lewis. I'm looking at it because then I'm going to wrap this up and asking how do you think it's going to play out. But do people get this moment in time? I'm really like, do people get this?
So Dr. Marshall, I'm gonna just respond to that first by saying the operative word here is think. And you ran by that so quickly. What do you think? How do you think it's gonna play out? And see, Dr. King said, one of the hardest things for human beings to do is to think. We don't wanna stop and take the time to think, because when we stop and take the time to think about what's been said, all of those who have said, all of those politicians who are running, what's that guy's name that looks like one of the guys at I don't know, Frankenstein, what's his name down in Texas? What's his name? Help me out.
Cruz.
Yeah, he looks like one of those characters. I'm sorry, that's how I remember him. You know, he says this, he talks out of every orifice he has. Okay, which one is the truth? Well, if you think about it, you know what's true. You know, so we say, well, how we, yes, we are bombarded with information and we go looking for information, but do we think about what's coming into us, or we just go along with it because of whatever? Well, you know, now is the time to think. Jonathan, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I want to go back to Dr. Marshall talked about how crazy that moment was when Trump supposedly tried to grab the wheel and say, he said, I'm the president, take me there now. I got to go up there. They wouldn't let him. But it begs the question, what was he going to do up there? And what was his plan? And did he even have a plan? But to me, if you think about these people storming in, many of them armed, 40 feet from, it turned out, from Pence, almost being able to, you know, just deflected from going into where all the politicians were. You know, it could have been a massacre up there.
Sure.
And why wasn't it? Because some of the testimony that's come out is that those people said they got in there and then they were waiting for their orders. And they didn't get the orders, you know. And then, you know, was that what Trump was trying to give? I mean, I think that the absolute horror of what that could have been is not fully registered.
And see, Jonathan, that's what I'm asking. And is, do people really get this? Because I've talked to enough people, and they're like, well, what did Jack Del Rio, who's from the Bay Area, right? He said it was a dust up at the. I mean, do people get what really happened and what is coming out about happening? And I know we like to go on with our lives, but I mean, in your conversations with people, do people, right? Like, we had a moment. All right, 3 hands. Go ahead, Tim.
I had wanted to comment on a couple of different things.
Go ahead.
But I think Trump actually was sufficiently, again, narcissistically grandiose that what he wanted to do was, once his people had subdued the opponents in the House chamber, he wanted to march in to the acclaim of the others and be acclaimed dictator for life. He has a Caesar complex. This is exactly what his plan was. The instructions were to make me the king. And if they had, you know, we got very close to something like that actually happening, I don't think it would have been successful, but that was what he had in mind to do. He wanted to be king, and that was his last chance to do it.
Thomas. You're muted.
I was just saying, I agree with you, Tim. It's like he got to the Rubicon, and then his chariot drivers were like, nope, can't let you cross. And everybody else did. Dr. Marshall, I was just thinking about, like, whether people get it.
Yeah.
And I think they do and don't simultaneously. There's this word coined by this professor at UC Berkeley called hypernormalization. And it describes like what was happening during the fall of the Soviet Union. I'm going to shamelessly read from Wikipedia because it describes it better than I could. But basically it was like everyone in the Soviet Union knew that the system was failing, but no one could imagine an alternative to the status quo. And politicians and citizens alike were resigned to maintaining the pretense of a functioning society. Over time, this delusion became a self-fulfilling prophecy, and the fakeness was accepted by everyone as real, an effect that Yurchak, the professor, coined hypernormalization. Wow. I think that process has been happening for a while now. And hopefully this committee is a step towards counteracting that, waking everyone up, lifting the veil.
He started baiting everybody with the fake news back before he was elected.
Yeah.
Listen, he started this whole process from the time somebody said he was on the ticket. He had a plan. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you're totally right.
Well, I won't be long here, but I will say this. I was playing golf today and I asked one of my fellow golfers, I said, well, what about the hearings? What do you think, man? And there was absolutely no comment whatsoever. But I want to move from there and say this. The mayor of Washington, D.C., she made it clear to the populace of the city that, listen, to the African Americans of the city, listen, this is not the place to be. You don't want to be out for this rally. For her to come out and send that message, she had to have some knowledge about how severe this thing could be. And when I think about what if there had been other ethnic groups in this situation, how could that have really transpired? So, you know, the word on the streets is we're street soldiers. This is all by design. Trump, he's an afterthought. He's a red herring. We don't want to get caught up in that. He is going to be brought to justice. The fact of the matter is, will the system be changed through this process structurally? And I think that's what's got to happen now. The Attorney General has to be accountable to his office. The Chief Justices have to be really above reproach, and the legislatures are going to have to come out of their little cocoons that they've been hanging in all this time. And we need to see change. The young people of this country deserve it. And that's what I have to say on that.
Listen, we're an hour and a half into this. This is unbelievable. I know it goes by so fast. And Nora, you probably like, I'm sleepy. Lindbergh, you probably, listen, here's what I like to do. If you don't mind, this will go on for a while. The bombshell, it's going to be another big thing on Tuesday. If we can keep in touch somewhere down the road, come back as we monitor this and have this conversation again, I think, and look, I'm getting texts, a lot of people watching this. Really, they texting me and thank you for having it. Because in the end, we're all in this together. We're all in this together. This is going to affect all of us. It's going to affect old folks, young folks, unborn, my grandson who just turned 10 weeks, he's in this. So I would, if you would do that, that would be wonderful. I'd really appreciate it. And just to Nora and Thomas, let me say this, and what gives me hope that is that, and January 6th is just all other stuff, and look, everything Dr. King worked for, we work for, is pretty much, that was my whole fear with Trump getting in office in the first place, is that all the hard things that we worked for in the 50s and the 60s and the civil rights movement would be gone. And pretty much he's doing that. But I want to say to Nora and Thomas that if it can happen, you changed history before, you can do it again. You can absolutely do it again. And what gives me, at 21 years old, I was running the BSU and I was changing I was changing my school, changing everything. once you get that, once you see it, and that's why you can do it again. You're going to have to do it again. You're going to have to do it again. And it is possible. And that's why it's always good to go back and look at the past in that sense, and people who did make great change, and study those figures. I mean, you know, Jonathan, our dear friend Clarence Jones, just Dr. King's lawyer, texted me the other day, sent me and said, man, everything we worked for, you know, for 50 years is pretty much gone. So we just gonna have to do it again. And he's 91 years old. So, you know, fight, go for it, be on alert, but don't go. The worst thing to do is, and I know it's confusing, and that's why it's so good to have these conversations. And that's why, to me, it's just like the family at the dinner table, you know, the generation sitting down and talking and having these conversations. That's what's so important. Final comments, anyone, before I let you go? Will, you had your hand up. I saw you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to say in response to what you just said, Dr. Joe, that Professor Eddie Glaude Jr. from Princeton wrote this book called Begin Again. And that goes to the point you just made, that there is a process, I think, where we have to begin again. In response to your earlier question, I would say that most of the folks that I talk to get it. My concern is that there are a lot of folks out there who just aren't paying attention. And with the structure that we have, how information gets disseminated, I'm concerned that they won't get the truth and really understand the truth when they see it. That's really my big concern. And I think that Lewis's comments about the structural system and getting that in order are absolutely on point. But the challenge, I think, is in an age of disinformation, misinformation, and distributed information from a wide variety of sources. How do you get a core set of information that is truthful out there and into everybody's hands so that they can look at it, evaluate it, and make decisions on it?
Jonathan?
That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Jonathan?
Thank you. You know, I'm very energized and sobered by this conversation. I want to thank everyone. Everyone has said profound things. I especially want to thank Nora and Thomas. You know, you shook me up in a good way by just sharing, you know, your sense of things among younger people, the alienation and disaffected feelings. And I guess I have a question. You may not have the answer, but I'd like to ask Nora and Thomas, to those of us from an older generation who, you know, are trying to think about how do we further the kind of legacy that Dr. King inspired and the kind of action that changed the world at that time. You know, how do we reach your generation more effectively? How can we be helpful or empowering? You know, any advice you have for us older people, I would love it.
Why don't I ask you to have all the answers? Go ahead, give your perspective.
I don't know if this is going to be the answer you're looking for, but it is something I've been thinking about. I really having some sort of regulation on these rising social media companies, on just the scale of misinformation and disinformation that's being disseminated. I mean, if there's any way that we can regulate that or filter that, or if we can't, then educating young people on how to filter the truth from misinformation and disinformation, then that's what we're going to have to do. Because if you want to reach young people at scale, my sense is that you're going to have to, I would assume, go through social media platforms or just web-based platforms in general. I mean, Thomas might be able to speak more to specifics of that, and I'm sure he has ideas, but really I think it's an issue of sifting through information.
Okay, Thomas. That's what happens.
Yeah, I don't have all the answers. Maybe I'll start with that. I think Nora's completely right. A lot of people our age experience the world beyond their direct community through social media. And these companies are largely unregulated or underregulated, but they have outsized influence on our collective consciousness. They definitely need to be reined in. But the more I think about it, I think the apathy and almost hopelessness, not to be down, but like it can be very overwhelming to think about the problems of this century, like climate change, like our democracy collapsing, right? And they're like extremely abstract. What's helped me has been being part of a group that, like, conversations like this, honestly, for me, but also my teachers are some of the people who have given me the most hope, arming me with knowledge, teaching me about like past successes in history. Like I just learned the other day that there was a good portion of the UN in the early 20th century that signed a binding agreement to end war, like globally. I had no idea about that. And that just like kind of gave me a lot of hope for humanity. Learning about, models for success and regulating the ways that we receive information, I think.
Great answers. Thank you. Tim.
Yeah, thank you for indulging me. One last comment to respond to something that both Nora and Thomas mentioned, which is about reining in media, social media. There are models. European countries have much more restrictive legislation than the US does about things like this. And there is something that I believe is unique in the United States, and that is the platforms like Facebook and Twitter, et cetera, Google have legislated immunity from negligence suits. And all it would take is an act of Congress to remove that immunity, and then they could be sued for negligence. Believe you me, that the next day they would take down any insightful posts. They would police themselves if they were subject to lawsuits for negligence, that they hadn't taken down something that caused harm to someone. So I think that's the solution, is to take away their immunity.
I want to thank all of you, really. This is great, man. I love this is what I do. Put people in the room, get the young people, let's have a conversation, because I want you to stay alive and free. It's that simple, right? And freedom, even now, is even more than just going to jail. I mean, we're really talking about freedoms, because a lot of them are being taken away right before our very eyes every day. And it is heartening to come from a generation when we shall overcome, and what is the thing, we've come too far to turn back now. All of that stuff is really inspiring, and we're going to need all of that to do this. But we got to take it seriously. And my concern is, I'm hope folks really, that quote you did about the Soviet Union, that was, yeah, that's right. That's how it works, right? People, then one day you wake up and an alliance got you, right? So all that is appropriate. Watch the hearings on Tuesday, and if you don't, can we convene again and do this in a just keep it going? Let me get some more young voices in here. I think it's great. Lady E, you want to say one last thing before we jump off here?
I do. I want to tell Nora, I hope you feel better. Take care of yourself. Bump up that immune system. Extra vitamin C always helps. All right. And then I want to thank everybody for being on the show tonight. It's wonderful when Dr. Marshall calls and you say yes and you show up. We really do appreciate that. Thank you for your time, your energy, your interest, your focus, your comments, your heart. And then it's a lot that's been said to Nora and Thomas. Why do you feel like we just coming after the young people? Because we've been here longer than we're going to be. And who you are and who you're going to be is going to make a difference in what happens to the tomorrows that's coming. I would like to challenge all of us to think about what if it does affect us? What if my life can change just because of the BS that's going on in our country? And I don't even know what it is. What if that career that I'm hoping for is skewed because, and I can only operate on, or I can't, and what if, and I had the opportunity to do something and I didn't? See, right now it could be one, tomorrow it could be two, and the day after that it could be you. We don't know. So what if? And I think if we, what did we say? Change begins with the individual.
That's right. That's our rule.
Everything we do makes a
Change begins with me.
difference.
Yep.
Everything we do makes a difference. And so who are you going to be today, tomorrow? Yeah, let's think, really think about that.
Love all of y'all. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Stay alive and free, stay engaged.